Hello, welcome. I'm Jill Jonathan with Red Wine and Blue, and a little bit about us at Red Wine and Blue. We're a community of women who use digital media and friend-to-friend organizing to change the world one suburb at a time. And one way we do this is through conversation. So today we are going to be talking about a very important decision that the Supreme Kristen will be joining me. I think she's joining in just a minute. And like many of us, I am a parent who works from home. So my kids are running around upstairs. It's very loud to me. I don't know if it's loud to anybody else, though. Are you there, Kristen?
Yep. Can
Okay,
you hear
good.
me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I hope you can't hear my kids too much, but it is what it
I
is. I
can't hear
don't.
them at all. I think you're good.
And Joe's going to be joining here too. At least they're happy sounds. They're not like fighting yet. I mean, they're like frenemies. It's like goes from, I'm like, oh, they're best friends. They're so cute to like screaming at each other. You just
Oh
never
yeah.
know. Can you relate, Jeff?
Oh God, yes, completely.
Right.
Although it's much more screaming at each other than best friends in my house, unfortunately.
Oh, oh man. I mean, we're just, you know what? We're just living our lives, trying to keep on track of what's going on in the news. And I will be honest, I feel like I'm someone who's pretty plugged in, but I don't really understand what's going on today. So, Kristen and Joe, I'm hoping you can kind of enlighten me a little bit. So, Kristen, why don't you go first? Let us know what happened today.
Yeah, so I think it's good to kind of track back to December of last year because that's when this case was initially heard in court. So that's a long time ago. And also when this case was first like accepted to be heard by the state Supreme Court, North Carolina had a much different situation then, like a year ago, than we do right now. So it's a little confusing. And so when the state Supreme Court decided to take up this case on June 30th of last year, the North Carolina Republicans were asking for the state Supreme Court to, first of all, look at our partisan gerrymandered maps. And they did not like that our state Supreme Court at the time was a Democratic majority, and they threw those maps out. And so included in that case was also the independent legislature theory, which we've heard about today. Now, fast forward to November 2022, we have an election, and that changes everything. North Carolina gains a conservative state Supreme Court, which Republicans have been using to their advantage here in North Carolina. And so the case was heard December 5th of last year, and Republicans basically argued that they were interpreting the Constitution in a different way, that they were basically saying that they should have all of the power to um, basically not be checked and balanced in our state Supreme Court, which is wild. Like, what? Like, they're just like, well, yeah, we want to cheat, basically, and not be held accountable or be held liable for this. So, um, the two main parts of this is that the independent legislature theory would have eliminated the power of state courts to strike down legislature drawn congressional gerrymandered maps, and also that the North Carolina General Assembly could manipulate our federal elections and write laws for our federal elections and not face any challenges in court anywhere.
Yeah. And all of this predicated on the idea that because they were interpreting the Constitution in this regard to mean that they could decide unilaterally everything as it pertains to elections, not just what their state constitution says about the date and time, et cetera, that they really believed that they could take those words in the Constitution and expand them to mean any election laws,
Mm-hmm.
which could have included, and honestly, this isn't completely decided, we can talk about that too, but until 2024, but that they theoretically could have included in that we have the broad authority to decide what the election laws are, to say we don't want to go with the popular vote anymore. Let's just say hypothetically that in North Carolina, the popular vote were to vote for Biden. The Republican legislature could have said, well, we're going to disband with using the popular vote as the guardrail for how we, what we do with our electors. We're going to throw that away, and we're going to use these other electors instead, and they want to vote for Trump. And their theory was that what the Constitution provides is that they can do that every state, by the way, can do that.
Yeah. Very scary to think about.
When people say this could have essentially upended democracy and democratic processes as we know them and have known them since the Constitution was written, it's not hyperbole. It's not too dramatic to say that.
No.
So my question is, and I will be honest, like I said, I feel like I'm kind of plugged in. I like to think that, and I haven't been following this that closely. And I think that's kind of the point. I think average Americans are we just, whatever. I don't, I've got to get my kids to school. I've got to put food on the table. I've got to do that. So it's hard to be paying attention to this kind of stuff. Kristen, and I know you're really plugged into legislatures and things like that. What are some of the things that we should be watching now that this decision has been made? Because I feel like I'm always cautiously optimistic with this type of stuff.
Yes. So I saw in the chat, we'll take the win. A win is a win. Absolutely, 100%. But I also live in the state of North Carolina. And I think people know by now that our state has been doing some ridiculously and also very harmful things. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this, we have a Republican majority state Supreme Court, and we have a Republican veto-proof supermajority in our legislature. So it's good news on a national scale, 100%. But if you live in a state like mine, where Republicans are not really getting a check and balance between voter suppression and gerrymandered maps, then it's not so great. And so as I dug further into this ruling, we need to be really cautious about or just be watching for how they're going to redraw our maps again, because in North Carolina, all three of our maps will be getting redrawn. The justices actually did not want to comment on that. They just said that the state Supreme Court did have the right to rule the way that they did at the time. However, they also need to be checked and balanced too by federal courts. So in North Carolina, all three of our maps are going to get redrawn. There will probably be another challenge by the same people that were defending in DC. Common Cause and the Southern Coalition for Social Justice here in North Carolina were arguing on behalf of the plaintiff. And so they're prepared to challenge again, but again, we have a conservative state Supreme Court. So I'm not we're not out of the woods, is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah. And North Carolina, this whole thing is particularly interesting because, I was talking about it a few months ago where I was hearing about the fact that the new Supreme Court in North Carolina was going to basically potentially render the Supreme Court's decision moot. And while they sort of did, because unfortunately for Kristen and our friends in North Carolina, their new Republican Supreme Court and super majority-proof Republican legislature is going to do this anyway. But, sorry, North Carolina.
Yeah.
But I will say that as far as the win is a win column goes, on a national scale, in terms of other states where this precedent had been set, would have then been enacted by deeply red states, similar to North Carolina. It would have been a slippery slope, the likes of which we probably wouldn't be able to recover from for at least a generation. Like, that's not overstating things, but so a win is a win, and on a national scale, and in terms of precedent, this is a good thing. This is also, I don't want to say restorative, because the Supreme Court, obviously, this court took our fundamental right to bodily autonomy away just a year ago. But I will say that it does, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say I have faith in them necessarily. Yeah. But what I was saying to Jill yesterday and this morning is that it does, I guess, enhance my belief that justice does prevail, and that all of this overreach that we're seeing, this sustained, constant ocean of overreach, that justice is slapping their hand back, because we are still a nation of laws and the Constitution still exists. And while it's scary that 3 of these justices actually thought that this was okay, because like that's crazy on its face, but what's even crazier about that is even among conservative circles, this idea was considered radical, right? Like, this was really, like, even conservatives were saying, nah, that's not really what the Constitution says. And what that opens the door for is essentially dismantling democracy itself. And the fact that 3 of them even went along with it is crazy, but the fact that the others did not is the part where I'm like, okay, that's a win. I will take that for now.
There is a line, and I think we might have found it.
Yeah, right.
We've been waiting, right? Where is the line?
Right. The line of extremism has been seen with this, at least. Like, the line on some other things is a little blurry, but when it comes to democracy, at least, they're like, nah, this is not it.
But see, then you get into the murky waters of what was really behind the Dobbs decision, right? Because special interests in that fight, you know, obviously we all know who those people are and who those groups are now that we're seeing these stories coming out about Alito, you know, being on these fancy fishing trips with people who have cases in front of the court. When it came to abortion, the special interests on the other side, the side that we saw Roe stripped away from us for, it's a different argument. Like, it's a different kind of sustained pressure than upending democracy. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that we have the lowest national approval of the Supreme Court in our nation's history isn't sort of a coincidence, right? Like, even though these decisions that are adhering to the Constitution should give us some confidence in them, because Dobbs so blatantly didn't, it's like we really do have to keep paying very close attention.
I know, it's like we can't rest for 1 second. It's like celebrate the win and then keep paying attention. And I'm curious if you all have a, opinion on the justices that dissented. And I don't know if you had a chance to read those or not, but I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
I read through some of Thomas's dissent, because he was the one who wrote the dissenting opinion, and he is basically trying to say, like, the 6 people that like voted in to like strike this down, basically, or like not go with it, he's like, y'all are crazy. Like, I think this should be like the rule of law. Like, this is how I also interpret it. And I think we all know that, like, Justice Thomas is an extremist in and of himself. And, like, I mean, he had his ProPublica moment too. So
yeah. I mean, yeah, his parents' house is paid for, his adopted son's education is paid for. I mean, he's been flown around the world by Harlan Crow, who has Nazi statues in his garden. I mean, like, again, ProPublica moments for sure. But like, I did not read the dissenting opinions. But as far as Alito and Thomas go, to Kristen's point, they absolutely 1000% are the most far right extreme on the court, and they don't think they have any oversight or should have any oversight. Gorsuch, I don't know enough about Gorsuch. I know he's a Federalist, but I don't know enough about him or the mindset behind why he would have dissented in this case. Yeah.
I don't know either.
Yeah, and I have to say, I don't know if I'm surprised. I don't even know, because Kavanaugh, I have so many feelings about just personally, because it's like, very triggering, right, to know that we have someone who is credibly accused, not just once, of sexual assault, is making these decisions about the state of our democracy. But I will say that I guess if we're gonna have a sexual predator on the highest court in the country for a lifetime seat, we should get a couple of votes thrown our way, right? Like,
Right.
maybe that's not too much to ask for. But it's almost like with Kavanaugh, you're kind of like, okay, I'm still gonna, make fun of you at a steakhouse, but whatever.
Right. I mean, I will say that I was just a tiny bit surprised. Like, I'm not surprised by much anymore, but Gorsuch has had like different feelings on other cases that more align with the liberal-ish moderate side of things. So, like, the fact that he joined Thomas and Alito in this dissent really says something about him. And I think it's something that we should be looking at going forwards for other democracy related cases, because I think there's already going to be some on the docket for the new term. I don't know the names off the top of my head, though.
Yeah, and this decision's going to come back to them. This case is going to come back to them. This issue is going to come back to them in 2 years, well, a year's time.
That's what we're talking about right now, OPX Blue.
So
I see in the comments.
Yeah, I was going to say, someone just asked if we could recap the decision and what it was.
So, in short, the Supreme Court of the United States decided 6-3 to strike down the North Carolina Republicans' argument of how they were basically interpreting the Constitution, and Republicans wanted to have like full control over elections and gerrymandered maps with no way to hold them like legally accountable or liable, etc. And basically the Supreme Court said, no, that's too extreme. Courts still have a role to play here. That's like what it is on like a national scale. It gets a little more niche when it comes to like North Carolina in and of itself.
Yeah, in the decision, the Supreme Court in their ruling, they rejected the theory of the independent state legislature, and it says here, in interpreting state law in this area, state courts may not so exceed the bounds of ordinary judicial review as to unconstitutionally intrude upon the roles specifically reserved to state legislatures by Article 1, Section 4 of the federal Constitution. And then it does say in the dissent, Thomas Gorsuch argued the case should have been dismissed given state level developments, because they were saying what has now transpired in the state, this is no longer applicable because the Supreme Court in the state is not the Supreme Court that landed this case in front of our Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But it does not disqualify it. Again, I'm not a legal expert, but as far as the precedent goes nationally, this is not a moot case. And so that's what the majority basically found.
Yeah. And North Carolina Republicans have already made, like, especially Tim Moore, who was the other person, like, in this case, his response earlier was, like, very nonchalant. He was like, we're going to do what we're going to do. Like, that's basically it.
Yeah, I mean, these are the same Republicans who brought the lawsuit, right, that are in charge of the legislature now, essentially, same speaker, et cetera. And as we've seen in North Carolina, Kristen knows this better than anybody, is that Republican legislature, that veto-proof legislature, just reversed, beyond the power of the governor to veto it, the state's policy regarding access to abortion.
Yeah.
Thanks, Trish. Hi, Trisha.
Okay, for anybody who doesn't know who Trish is, Kristen, if you don't live in North Carolina, you might not know, but I feel like we all need to know because this could happen to a state you live in.
Yeah,
right.
Good. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Trish.
Sure. So Trisha Cotham, who was a Democrat here in the state of North Carolina, switched her party now 2 full months ago. It was like the very beginning of April. And since then, we've had a lot of harmful legislation pass with her now voting. I mean, she voted with Republicans pretty consistently before then, but now it's every single vote. Even on anti-LGBT legislation, which she said that she would never do, but here we are.
And didn't she author legislation when she was a Democrat related to abortion access? Didn't she give like some moving speech about her personal experience advocating for why?
Yeah.
And then a few short months later, she flipped completely and sided with right.
So her abortion story that she told was actually back in 2015. So it was a long time ago actually. But yes, like she had added her name pretty consistently. Every new session, or Democrats, excuse me, introduce the same like set of bills that are always done on arrival. It's just like to say, hey, we did this because that's just what we do, to codify Roe. And she like even signed on to that in February of this year, 2 months before she flipped, which is wild.
And tell the audience, Kristen, if you don't mind, why did she flip?
Because pettiness. That is the best way. Democrats are mean to me. And I have my own opinions that I will keep off of this, but just that is so funny to me because our Democratic Party doesn't really do that, but whatever.
Yeah, but what Trisha exemplifies is really what this Supreme Court also exemplifies, which is when it comes to sustaining this democracy, the margins are razor thin. In the state of North Carolina, which was a safe haven for a lot of women in the South who had now have to travel much further, and it's much harder for them, one woman was able to upend all of this, strip that right, reduce that right, essentially stripping it away from women. But also, if we had seen in our Supreme Court a different decision here, states that have Republican majorities that would like very much to have this kind of control over elections so that they can determine the winner of a presidential election would have done so too. The margins are literally this wide. You have a decision of 6-3. That could have gone a couple more votes, right? It could have gone the other way. And then we're looking at really, as I said, I think the dismantlement of democracy as we know it.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, that's the thing that I feel like I've learned in recent years is I have taken democracy so much for granted. Like, it's not something like, you just, at least the way I grew up, it was very like, we live in the free country of America. Democracy is great. We're bringing it to other countries and we're like, people to look up to and, just like that proud to be American thing. And like, oh yeah, like we have our democracy. And I never thought for most of my life that was something that could just slip away. And then these, since the 2020 election, especially, I'm just like, holy crap. Like I've never even thought about what that would look like.
It's like wild to think about because like even here, like our legislature right now is trying to like suppress our vote even more. They introduced this bill. We talked about it on another live a couple of weeks ago, and it passed through the Senate finally last week where they're trying to make voting irrelevant. And that's how they're going to try to steal elections more. It's gerrymandering, and then all of these bills that are going to throw out our votes, purge our voter rolls. And people are not going to know this until they show up at the polls and they're like, you're not registered. If you want to register today, you only get a provisional ballot. We're going to like request voter ID now. So like people are not going to know until they show up to the polls, and that's bad news.
Yeah, and I will say, Jill, what you were saying about, not realizing the fragility of our democracy growing up, I would agree with you 100%. I didn't either, and I didn't really until Donald Trump. But what I will say is that it's not just our impressions of what was going on in terms of the attack on our democracy. It's reality. We're talking about a different Republican Party than the one, you and I grew up with. Kristen, you're a little bit younger, but still, they are still changed from even your youth. We're talking about a Republican Party now that knows that it's essentially in the throes of extinction because the country is changing in a way, the electorate is changing in a way that you notice what they're trying to stop, right? Like what they're trying to suppress and who they're trying to keep down are the people that they know aren't necessarily their voters. So they're in the throes of extinction, and what are they going to do when they're in the throes of extinction? Whatever it takes. Literally whatever it takes. If that means dismantling democracy itself for them to survive, to maintain power, so be it. So we realize now, thanks to Trump in large measure, because I always think of him as like a moss or a fungus that grows in between like those pavers on your patio. Like if there's a little tiny crack and they get in there and then they start to expand and expand and expand. I don't think we've had other presidents who were as inclined to finding those cracks, getting in them and expanding them so that, other molds and viruses and, whatever things could jump on board. But Donald Trump did that. And the party has fully embraced that. So our democracy is under sustained attack. And that's what's making us feel so acutely aware of how fragile it is. And it's like, that's why, it's hard to pay attention to all this stuff, especially the SCOTUS stuff. It's so weedsy. And I'm not, as I said, at all a legal scholar, but we do have to pay attention 1,000%, because every day from this day on, from years ago, is a fight, an absolute daily fight.
Yeah.
And so there's some other decisions that will be coming out as well. Kristen, do you know enough about to just kind of tell us what else to be looking for?
Absolutely. So we have 7 cases left, and there's 4 pretty big ones still left. No, 3 left. 3 big ones that are left that I know of. So the first one is C3 Creative. I think it's a case out of Colorado that basically somebody that is homophobic is saying that she is going to use her First Amendment right to deny business to gay couples. But the thing is that no gay couple ever came to her to create a wedding website, which is really interesting to me. So, and then there's affirmative action, which is also another North Carolina-based case. I think there was also UNC was a part of it, and I think Harvard was the other part of it. So that's coming out, and then the third one is student debt from the Biden administration. And, we've had those payments on hold for 3 years now, and it's supposed to turn back on, I think, in August. And
what's
particularly the big ones.
What's really interesting about that case is that ProPublica piece that came out on Alito, the one, where he's holding the $1 million salmon, where he said he only took the seat on the private jet because it was available. That one of the people involved with bringing that case to the Supreme Court was the same fella who flew them all around the world. Who flew him to Alaska. I mean, it's
that's curious.
I joked on Twitter that as far as the Supreme Court goes, the appearance of impropriety being a problem, literally, there's a meme or a GIF where the guy gets up and jumps out the window. That's what the appearance of impropriety is done on the Supreme Court, let alone full-blown, what are you going to do about it? Impropriety. I had this conversation yesterday. What we have are mechanisms in place to have oversight of the Supreme Court. Hey, Congress! But they're not doing it. They're just not doing it, and we now know that they cannot be trusted to oversee themselves because it's systemic, institutionalized corruption at this point. And this case, the case of the student loan forgiveness, is rife with lots of question marks.
100%.
Yeah.
And affirmative action. I mean, I don't know. Nobody can predict that, but I don't know. Any thoughts of, which way that can go? And then what does that mean for the future?
So there was actually, I think it was on Apple News or some podcast I was listening to in the last week that said that the state of California actually did away with affirmative action like maybe 8 years ago or something like that. It's been some time in the last decade, and it says that the admission of people of color is definitely down. The admission of people that are low income is definitely down. And I mean, I wouldn't put it past this court to like completely get rid of it. I know that we've had a couple of wins in this like last couple of weeks with like ICWA and then Allen v. Milligan, another redistricting kind of case. But like this court has also not been really good on some other things. So I am not hopeful about that one, and student debt too.
Yeah, I think I'm not particularly hopeful about either of those, and I guess I was waiting with bated breath for these, especially this one. Yeah, but again, this is probably the cynic and the skeptic in me, and who knows, probably there's a good deal of trauma related to their other decisions, as we know. But part of my brain is like, are they making calculations about voting in the affirmative for some of this stuff while knowing that they have to temper some of the more extreme stuff that they're going to go with. Like, it's terrible to think that way, but again, lowest approval of the court in our country's history for a reason.
Yeah.
I had the same thought. So
Yeah.
yes, I know. I'm kind of like, what's coming down behind here?
It's like it's a little bit like fool me once, right? Like it's
Right.
yeah.
We
But
can
only-
have something as a treat, but only one.
Yeah, and it's only like they're gonna sit there for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And mine, fine, totally fine.
It's all fine.
Yeah,
Right.
But today was a win. Several wins. They had the Counterman decision too, related to threatening language, which is a whole other conversation. But again, a good one. So we'll take the wins where we can. Today was a pretty good day for democracy. It's been a pretty good week for democracy. Knock on wood. For now.
But pray for North Carolina, y'all.
Yeah,
We got a long way to go.
Yeah.
we will.
So
Yeah.
bad for you guys down there. I really do. It's terrible.
I don't know, but I do like, and Joe and I talked about this yesterday too, just like making sure we're recognizing the positives, and
100%.
we have to celebrate that when we can and keep us energized. I always think of Watts, the founder of Moms Demand Action. She talks about that a lot, of just like celebrating like all the wins, and that's what gives her hope. So
Yeah, the wins are what sustains us, right?
Yeah,
Like, if we just feel like we're buried under a mountain of disheartening, dystopian, just disgustingness, then it's hard to want to get up and fight.
Yeah.
But these
I
wins
think today's decision is going to be good for Ohio. Jill, don't you guys have like some gerrymandering stuff there too?
Oh yeah.
Hold on one second.
Gerrymandering stuff there too. Oh yeah.
Oh, why is it echoing?
Gerrymandering stuff there too. Oh yeah. Oh, why is it echoing? Gerrymandering stuff there too. Oh yeah. Why is it echoing?
I am dead. That's so funny.
I don't know what happened, and then we lost Joe. Oh.
Bye, Jill. BB, I would appreciate it if you would stop asking that because I'm on a work call. I literally work here. Thank you. So I would love to know like more about the gerrymandering stuff going in Ohio, because like if this really helps, like that would be amazing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I wonder if we could even get somebody on our team in Ohio or somebody else to talk a little bit more about that, because I would love to know a little bit more about this. Well, even living here in Ohio, but I know, I mean, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. And I'm going to try to not think about, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop? Or, yeah, I just have that mentality too. It's really hard for me not to, but.
Yeah, it is definitely hard. But I feel bolstered by this personally. So I'm gonna put that in the W column.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
We're going to put that in the W column. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And seriously, if you are not familiar with Red Wine and Blue, go to our website. That's the first place to start. It's redwine.blue. We have all kinds of resources. We have free online trainings. We have an incredible social media accounts. Thanks to Kristen, who runs our social media. Joe and I do a lot of explainer videos, and Joe and I host a lot of live conversations like this on different platforms. I always say, like, we're trying to keep you in the know and keep you inspired to keep going, because it's going to take all of us. And if none of us has to do it all, if all of us does something, I don't think I said that right, but I remember someone saying that one time. But that's
Kelly Kraut says that.
Who says that?
Kelly Kraut from Arkansas.
I'm like, I just love that. I always think about that. And I think about that for myself too, when I feel overwhelmed. And Joe and I've had this discussion where I'm like, okay, I can rest a little bit because there's other people stepping in, and when they need rest, then I can step in, and it's just going to take all of us. So
100%.
A W for democracy today. So.
Yeah. I love it.
Don't know what tomorrow is, but that's what today is. So here we go. All right. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.